Lesson 1-6, Relations. Our essential question is, how do you determine the independent and dependent variables? So our two new vocab words are independent variable and dependent variable. I'm going to try and give you a couple of ideas for how to figure out which variable is which when you're reading a situation, because this can be pretty tricky. The independent variable, if you think about making a little t-shirt table like you've done in previous courses, you often have an input and output. The input would be the variable that you plug something in for. And then the output would be what you get out. So for example, you may have seen equations like y equals 3x plus 1, where you can put in whatever you want for x, your input variable. So x is the input variable. So if I put in a number like 0 for x, what do I get out for y? So y equals 3 times 0 plus 1. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. Like that. So if I put in 0 for x, I get out 1 for y. So if I pick another value, I can put in like 1 for x. I can put in anything I want, anything at all. So y would equal 3 times 1 plus 1. Well, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. I could keep on doing this forever. So what I want you to see by this example is that the input variable, which was x, is the independent variable. Because when you're independent, you've got choice. You've got a lot of choices. Like if you're independent, you don't have to rely on something else. You stand on your own and you can make your own decisions when you're independent. So the independent variable is the input variable, which is x. So it's the variable x typically, and when you think about that variable x, it's the one that you work with first. Like you've got some say in what you're filling in for x. You graph it first when you're graphing out a coordinate plane. You graph x first and then y. So the independent variable is x. It happens first. It happens first. The dependent variable is the output variable, or y. And that output variable, or y, depends on the other variable. So it depends on x, or whatever the other variable is that you're working with. Because it happens as a result of the other variable. We're going to look at some situations now, word problems, and we're going to be asking you to identify which variable is independent and which one is dependent. Okay, so in gym or phy ed class, the number of calories that you burn increases as the number of pacers you do increases. So we need the independent variable and then the dependent variable. What are the two things that we're talking about here in this situation? What are they? I'm going to use my highlighter here. In gym, the number of calories you burn increases as the number of pacers you do increases. So we've got the number of calories as one of our variables. The other variable would be the number of pacers. So that means running back and forth across the gym, in case you're not familiar with pacers. So what happens first? What do you do first? Do you burn the calories first, or do you run the pacers first? Well, obviously, you have to run the pacers. So the independent variable is the number of pacers you do. You get to determine, or your body gets to determine, the number of pacers that you're able to do. Then the dependent variable is the number of calories you burn, because the number of calories depends on how many pacers you do. The more pacers you do, the more calories you're going to burn. So the number of calories burned is dependent on the number of pacers. Okay, our next situation. If the temperature gets cold, sales of winter coats goes up. Okay, so we live in Minnesota. So one of the variables here is the temperature. So we've got the temperature as one of our variables. Then the other variable would be sale of winter coats. Winter coat sales. So now, independent and dependent. What is happening first here? This problem is telling us that if the temperature gets cold, then the sale of winter coats goes up. So it's saying if the temperature gets cold, like first, so that means temperature is the independent variable. And temperature happens first. If the temperature gets cold, then sales of winter coats go up. So dependent, winter coat sales. So winter coat sales depend on the temperature outside. If it was really, really warm, they wouldn't sell very many coats. If it's really, really cold, they sell more winter coats. Okay, a couple more of these. The more hours you work, the more money you make. So, highlighter, variables. The more hours you work. So, hours you work. That's a variable. Another variable, money you make. Money you make. Now, what happens first? Independent, dependent. What happens first? First, do you work some hours or do you make some money? Pretty sure the hours you work have to happen first. So, hours worked is independent, and dependent would be the amount of money you make. So, the amount of money you make depends on how many hours you work. True. All right. In the winter, the amount of electricity used increases as the temperature falls. So in the winter again, now we've got the amount of electricity used. So electricity used increases as the temperature falls. So our variables are the electricity use and the temperature. Independent, dependent. What happens first? First, are you using the electricity, or first does the temperature fall? First thing is the temperature. The change in the temperature is going to cause you to use more electricity. So the amount of electricity used depends on the temperature outside. That's true in the summer and in the winter. In the winter, electricity used to heat your house. In the summer, to cool your house. Okay. Two more. The deeper you dive in the ocean, the greater the pressure is on your body. Okay, so the deeper you dive in the ocean, so your depth is one of the variables, and the other one, the pressure that you feel on your body. So, what happens first? First, do you feel the pressure, or first, is it your depth that changes? First thing that changes is your depth. The deeper you go down, the more pressure you feel. So the pressure that you feel, so like if you ever dive down to the bottom of a pool and your ears, you start to feel that pressure in your ears, they hurt, feel kind of painful. Maybe you come back up and then they have to pop. So that pressure that you feel depends on how deep you dive down. So depth happens first, then the pressure. Okay, Last one, I think this time. The area of a square increases as the length of a side increases. So the area of a square is one of our variables, and the other one is the length of a side. The length of a side. So, independent, dependent. Which one is happening first? Is it the area of the square? It says the area of the square increases as the length of a side increases. So if you increase the length of a side, so side length, if the side length changes, then the area changes with it. So the area of the square depends on the length of its sides. That's true. Area depends on side length. Okay, you should be able to write a summary now. So make sure that you write complete sentences for each. One that is talking about independent variables and the other talking about dependent.